You are listening to When the Bow Breaks. If you'd like to contact us, you can do so by sending an email to wtbbpodcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the show, leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes.
Welcome to When the Bow Breaks with your guest host, AC Fisher. So obviously today we're doing something a little bit different in that Alexis is guesting on her own show.
Yep.
So Alexis, welcome to When the Bow Breaks.
Thank you. You're so hospitable. It's good to be here.
It's always interesting entertaining somebody in their own studio.
Yeah. It's
So we'll skip the normal formalities. We know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Now we want to hear what you're all about. So several weeks ago, you interviewed me for this show. And the little bits that you were able to share from your own story and listening to mine, I found actually quite fascinating. It gave me a little bit of a glimpse into you.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as your pilot episode went live, I couldn't actually wait to get into that and hear a little bit more about you. But I actually found that I was really wanting for more. And I can't help but think that maybe a lot of the other listeners are sort of in the same position. I mean, people come on your show, they talk to you, and we hear so much about them, but we just get all these little teasers about Alexis.
Yeah.
And I think what we're both hoping to do today is to just dig into a little bit more about the host of the show. I mean, we have a general idea about like why you wanted to do the show, what your goals are. But I think we all sort of are curious, what makes you tick? Like, where did this whole thing start? Take us back to the beginning. Let's go back to, when you were just a glimmer in the eyes of your mother and father.
Okay. Well, before I was a glimmer, I don't want to go too much into it because it would take friggin' forever, but my parents married in the 60s, and then they had my older brother and sister like late 60s, early 70s. And then 10 years later, they had me. But like during that time, some stuff happened like in my family. When my older brother, who's 11 years older than me, my sister's 14 years older than me, when my older brother was still in my mother's womb, my father had an affair with someone at work, which produced a child, a son.
Okay.
So that was something that I didn't know about until I was in high school when my mother told me, and she explained that she was really stressed during the pregnancy because of that. And so without her really telling me too much more, I kind of put it together that things weren't so good between my mom and dad for a while. And then all of a sudden they had me 10 years after that. So I was born 82, and then they had my younger brother. Now, when they had my younger brother, things started to get kind of weird at home. When my younger brother was born, my mother was in the hospital, and because my younger brother, my baby brother, had jaundice, and so my parents were there a lot. And my sister, my older sister, she was about, she was 14 years older than me, so she was about 17, 18. Yeah, almost 18 when she was babysitting me. So I'm like 3 and she's 17. So that just kind of gives you a picture. My older brother's 14, I think.
So there's quite an age gap between the siblings and at least the older ones and yourself.
Yeah. Big age gap. Like, they were my siblings, but it was more like by the time I was old enough to remember them, they were almost like other adults in the house,
Right.
They had their own lives and they didn't play with toys and things like that like I did. So they had friends and social lives and cars and, stuff like that. So it was a little bit different. So I was usually kind of like on my own. I was very okay with playing by myself. I had a good imagination, but I think I was too little to really realize how much I was really left alone because I was able to entertain myself. And I had my basic
was there
needs,
like an assumption with your parents that your older siblings would be sort of looking out for you during this time?
Yeah. It was kind of said that there were only certain times when my sister had to babysit me. It wasn't like all the time, but there was one instance where both my parents were at the hospital And my older brother was, he was at a friend's house, or maybe he was at the hospital with my parents. I'm not sure, but I know it was just my sister and I at home. And there was this one incident where my sister was supposed to give me dinner and then put me to bed. And then after my parents left, it was like, as soon as they left, she said, okay, it's time for bed. And I was like, oh, it's, I haven't had my dinner yet. And she's like, no, you're being a brat and you're going to bed. But it was funny because like, I didn't remember being a brat. I didn't remember doing anything in the time from when my parents left till the time, she's telling me I'm going to bed right away. Like I didn't remember doing anything.
So her reaction was kind of a surprise to you.
Yeah, it was a surprise to me. Definitely. I wasn't prepared for that. And I was like, I thought she was just joking. I was like, no, it's like, we have to have dinner first. Like, then I'll have my bath and I'll go to bed. I'm trying to like negotiate, and
because you understood the routine, but she was deviating from it.
Yeah, she was deviating from it. And so I was trying to put my foot down, like, no, like, then I started getting sassy. And I didn't say anything like mean or anything, but I was just like, no, it's like, I want my dinner. Like, I'm hungry. And it was at that moment when I said I was going to tell mom and dad or something. It was then when the physical abuse with my sister started. I got a strong slap to the face. And she takes me by my arm and drags me from the living room into the bathroom. And it happened really fast. I just remember kind of being like put in the tub, and the tub was like empty still. And,
so you're just a little kid. You're trying to figure out like why you're not getting your supper.
Yeah.
Why the routine's being violated, and now you're getting slapped around and thrown into an empty tub.
Well, yeah. At this point, I'm not even thinking about my dinner now. I'm thinking, okay, that part's skipped. Now it's bath time. Okay. And so I'm taking my bath, and I remember being in there like a really long time, like until the water was freezing cold. And I remember like I was too small to like reach the linens in the bathroom. Somebody always got, what I needed down, like a towel or whatever I needed. And I always had my pajamas ready and stuff like that. But this time, none of that was done. And so I realized like, oh, I can't reach anything. And so I started yelling for my sister, I'm done. Can I have a towel? I'm like yelling, and, sorry if that was too loud. But, like you can imagine like little 3-year-old me, just like, I'm done. I need a towel. I'd like to get out of the bath. Like, okay. And, basically, succumbing to whatever my sister's mood is, and okay, like try not to piss her off anymore. Like just, do what she says, and then I'll talk to mom and dad later.
Yeah.
So, but she didn't come, and I stayed there for like much longer, like to the point where my skin was irritated and I was getting tired. And, so I just started to realize nobody was going to come and get me. And so I got out of the tub and I drained the water like I was supposed to, made sure that, all that stuff was done. I couldn't
you were
even
holding
reach,
up your end of the bargain.
I couldn't even reach the light switch to shut it off. Like that's how small I was. And so I leave the bathroom. I use whatever light I could see from the bathroom to light my room. Our house was really tiny, and my room was kind of like an internal room. Like you had to walk through my room to get to another room, so it wasn't actually a bedroom, but it was a little kid's room. I didn't really care that people were walking through my room. I didn't need privacy at 3 years old, but it was a really small house. But so I opened my door and just to try to find something that I could wear. I couldn't reach my pajamas, or I couldn't see anything, and I couldn't reach the light switch. So all I knew to do was I just crawled into bed and I wrapped myself up in my bed sheets, and I'm like dripping wet and I'm cold. And I don't even remember, like, I think my main blanket was being washed. And so it was just the sheet. And so I was like wrapped up in a wet sheet, and I was really cold. And I remember like, it's Southern California. It's not that cold, but when you're little and you're 3 and you're wet and it's late night, it's cold enough. And so I remember being uncomfortable, but I eventually fell asleep. And yeah, again, nobody came to check on me or to ask if I was okay. Like nothing happened until my parents, come home, and somebody flipped the light on. And I'm like, oh God, like that's not often that happens where someone turns the light on in the middle of the night. And so it woke me up, and my mom is kind of upset and she's mad. And why does she have no clothes on? And why is she wet? And then I just kind of explained, Sissy didn't take care of me. She said I was a brat, and she didn't, she put me to bed without dinner, and I wasn't really like able to explain everything because I was like half asleep. And,
Right.
but I remember saying that she slapped me. I don't know if I remember telling her exactly how or where, but, she was just kind of mad that, I wasn't being taken care of like I was supposed to have been. And I remember my mom saying a thing or two to my sister, but beyond that, nothing really happened. But I didn't
So your sister wasn't really taken to task for the abuse or the neglect?
No, not really.
Okay.
As far as I know, it wasn't, because that abuse continued when I got older. Like it wasn't a daily thing, but she still slapped me. She still burned me with curling irons and things like that. She did what she could to get away with like trying to hurt me. She pulled my hair when she was brushing my hair. She would just pull like extra, extra hard, and then she would just say, oh, you need to sit still, but it was her tugging and pulling like out of anger. And, I have some scars from that, like being burned like on my neck and on my chin from the curling iron. This is the 80s. So it's like curling iron and hairspray, and
that was all part of everyday life.
Yeah, it was. But, for a 3-year-old getting burned with a curling iron, your sister yanking on your hair when you barely have any, it wasn't pleasant. It wasn't a pleasant part of my routine.
So was your sister like your primary caregiver a lot of the time? It sounds like your parents weren't really there much.
No, she wasn't. And that's why she wasn't, because she wasn't taking care of me. And my mom was more irritated at the fact that she was coming home and I was cold and wet and wasn't fed, and I was complaining. She didn't really care too much about the fact that I was slapped. She figured that was something that I needed.
Okay.
So yeah, that was the whole kind of problem. So
your mom was kind of okay with the abuse.
Yeah.
She just wasn't okay with the neglect and the inconvenience.
Well, back then, that's the thing. Like, they didn't call slapping in the face if you talked back abuse. Not in my family. That was, you were talking back, you need to be disciplined.
No, I mean, that's how it was in my family too. That was just normal stuff.
Yeah. Now I can say that it was abuse because, yeah. But then it took me years to be able to really acknowledge that. It wasn't even until after, like, I spent years in counseling. It was like, it didn't come out until like I was in support group, I think, saying that word abuse. I just had like practicing it because I knew I was abused, and I was like trying to get comfortable with saying it. But, yeah, she wasn't my primary caregiver, but she did babysit me sometimes. And after a while, like they had her stop because it was too much of a problem. And she also had her own car.
What was too much of a problem? Sorry.
Too much of a problem was me complaining, I guess, that I didn't like how she was taking care of me. And my parents figured it was just because we were sisters and we didn't get along. That was always what my parents assumed. They didn't assume that, as soon as they were going to leave, she was going to throw me in the tub and not give me dinner and slap me for saying so, that I wanted my dinner,
They thought this was just a case of incompatible siblings.
Yeah. That's really what they thought. And, but
that must have been hard for a young girl to try to digest all of that.
God, yeah, it was, because it just kept happening as I got older. Like, maybe she didn't babysit me anymore much after that. It was my older brother. But when it turns to my older brother, it's different. My older brother was nothing like my sister. He was kind and he was gentle and he was always very accommodating of me. Like, he would buy me like a Barbie doll on my birthday, and he would make sure that like I had all these books with cassette tapes that went with them to read to me, because nobody read to me at home. My parents didn't read to me. My sister didn't read to me. My brother, he could have read to me, but he's like, I don't like to read,
Well, where was he when this stuff was happening with your sister?
He was usually gone. That was, when it was him and my sister at home, none of that stuff ever happened. It was only when I was alone with my sister.
All right.
Yeah. Nobody ever saw my sister hit me. So that was another factor. They didn't believe me for a really long time because they never saw it happen.
So that in itself must have been its own bag of issues.
Oh yeah. And it was always like, is she going to hit me? I'm worried she's going to hit me because if she hits me, nobody's going to believe me. So I always had anxiety around my sister after that. Up until I stopped talking to her. But backing up, when it comes to my brother, it was different because he was kind and he was always playing games with me, and he made sure that that I was fed, and he wasn't the greatest cook, but he always used to make me sandwiches. And I remember like being in the kitchen, stomping my feet, cut the edges off. Please cut the edges off. And he'd be like, okay. He'd always tease me like he wasn't going to, and
Right.
then he would. And it always used to bother me. But it was like, funny little stuff like that.
Well, he sounds like a good brother.
He was.
for the most part.
He was the best. There were some times when everyone would be gone and he would be watching me, and my parents would be like, you can't have anyone over. And then they would leave, and I'd be like, remember, Mom said you can't have anyone over. And then what did he do? He would invite like half the block over, and we would have a house full of kids breakdancing on the living room floor because we had hardwood floor and a huge master stereo. So it was awesome. And I was like a 3-year-old, like right in the middle of all that. And I had the greatest time, and there was never any like violence or drugs or anything like that. Like really, people came over for a couple dances and then they went home, and it was fun and it was fine, and nothing bad ever happened. And but still, like all the stuff that, he was told not to do, he did, but I was still in a safer environment than I was with my sister. So when my brother would disobey my parents, I didn't really give a shit because I knew that I was okay and that I was safe. And I liked my brother's friends at the time, and they were always really nice people. And I played with some of their younger siblings. So it was just kind of like, kids in the neighborhood. But yeah, he was always very accommodating to me and making sure that I had toys and that I had, that I wasn't, that I was comfortable and that I wasn't scared and that I wasn't hungry and all the things my sister didn't do for me. Are you enjoying When the Bow Breaks? If so, visit us on Facebook, like and share. And, but as he got older, and then it was like me and my younger brother, but he was still little. My younger brother was hardly ever babysat by my older siblings. He was like hardly ever around because he was still like a nursing baby. So he was with my mom still a lot.
Okay.
So I was still like being babysat by my brother.
So for the most part, you were the youngest kid in the house at any given time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was like, 2 teenage siblings and then a tiny little kid. And I was small too. Like I was small for even a 3-year-old. Like I wore 2T clothes until I was 5 because I always had health issues, and that's like another part that has to do more with my mom. But I had a lot of health issues, and it kind of like stunted my growth and and affected like my body's like development and things like that in like with my bones and my joints and my nerves and things like that. But anyway, as my brother got older, he started spending more time with a particular friend around the corner. Spent more and more time there. He started coming home, acting kind of funny and, like extra happy. And
as a young kid, you just didn't understand it.
Yeah, I didn't understand it, but I didn't see it as a bad thing at the time. And then my brother, we all got a little older. We moved from that house to a larger house because obviously we needed more space. And so we moved in with my grandparents and built an addition on their house. But while this was all being done, we were still kind of in crammed sleeping quarters. This is while the house was being built, but we'd already moved there. There was this particular night where my brother, a couple of years later, my brother had other friends that he was going to visit, and he was staying there for longer periods of time and started to kind of, I don't know, seem like a rebellious teenager, I guess. He didn't seem abnormal, but to me, it seemed like he was different.
Like this is you from the young child perspective?
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't know what was happening. I knew that he was changing, and I knew that something like had a hold on him that didn't have a hold on him before. This wasn't him coming home happy and giggling and goofy like he used to. This was him being upset all the time and anxious and nervous. So now when he was babysitting me, he was irritated that he had to do it.
So you sort of lost the fun, cool caregiver brother.
Yeah. I mean, he was still trying to have fun. Like, I remember this one time I was actually egging him on to have fun, like, cause he wasn't playing with me and I was really mad. And I was like, why didn't you play with me? And, so there was this like little bouncy ball and he was like bouncing it on the wall, like playing dodgeball with me with it. And, just trying to hit me when he wouldn't have hurt me with it, but he was trying to bug me and I was trying to get him to play. So I was like, yeah, he's playing with me and he's just trying to hit me with his ball, like, his little sister. And then all of a sudden, like I hear this crash and all this glass falls on me. Like I'm okay.
Oh,
like
no.
I didn't get hurt. But the tiny little bounce ball had broken like a brand new window in our brand new house. And, that was just being remodeled. And we knew that was going to upset mom and dad. But at the same time, we both like started laughing and it was like friggin' funny. And we're both like, oh shoot. So he grabs the broom and the dustpan and cleans it up. He doesn't blame me for it or anything. So, stuff like that start to happen. My brother starts getting sloppy with taking care of me and starts to have like a bad attitude. He's still not watching me that often. It's usually like when my parents are going to church or like at a meeting or something. And my younger brother's usually with them. So a little more time goes on. And, at this point, I'm like 7. I'm 7 years old and we're in this house and I have a room in the front house, but the door lock doesn't work good on it. It's like an old door. There's a reason why I'm saying this. My brother really started to get into drugs. By this time, I know it's drugs. Like, I don't know how to express that. I know that he's doing something because I saw movies when I was a kid,
Right. You know enough to know what drugs look like in a general sense.
And I knew my brother enough to know that wasn't who he was. And, so this one particular night, the same thing kind of happened again, like what had happened with my sister. My parents leave and, I'm like, oh, it's dinner time. And he says, no, you're going to bed. You're being a brat. Almost the same exact words. And I'm thinking, no, not this again. Like, no, I'm not being a brat. Like, I need to have dinner and then I'll go to bed. Like, why is this happening? And, so I started arguing. I started getting really mad and he sends me to my room and he tries to lock me in, but of course the door doesn't lock. And so he's like 17 at this point or 18 at this point. He's an adult. He's 18. He's pushing on the door. I'm trying to push back on it. And I'm like, I'm doing my little sister thing. Like we're kind of giggling and there's a little bit of pushback and stuff. Like we're not exactly fighting.
So it's not entirely crappy.
No. Yeah. So we're pushing, and then I'm like kind of egging him on a little. I'm like, you're going to get tired. You can't hold it forever. Being kind of a pain in the ass little sister.
Right.
But then when he opens the door, he grabs like a pencil box that I had in my room and he threw it against the wall and pencils and shavings and shit just fly everywhere. And I was like, whoa. Like, I don't think I could have gotten hurt, but I mean, it's possible. And I'd never seen that kind of behavior from my brother before. So that kind of scared me.
So was this sort of a case of like you perceived it as a bit of a game and then it turned kind of ugly all of a sudden?
Yeah, I guess so, because I wasn't used to my brother treating me that way. He had never done that stuff that my sister had done before. He was always a nice guy. And I only just started noticing that he started acting weird. And I'm like, why are you not playing with me? Like, come on. And so I didn't understand like I didn't really understand why he was acting that way. I didn't really put the two together, really. I knew that something was going on. Like I knew about the drugs, like, and I'll get into that too, because I talked to those people. But anyway, so I try to get out again. He puts me back in and like, there's more like pushing and I'm like, but this time I'm kind of getting upset. Like that's not okay. Now I have to clean up this mess and, well, he took this chair. It was like a small kid's but it was like a solid oak chair. And he threw the chair and it almost hit me. I don't think he didn't like aim it directly at me. I know he wasn't trying to do that. but he was definitely trying to scare me. And when he threw it against the wall, it broke. And that's when I just kind of stopped. And I was like, okay, I don't want to try to make him angry anymore. So I stopped fighting back. I stopped talking back. I let him shut the door. And I just kind of sat there and I don't know, for a while trying to kind of figure out what to do. I didn't know what to do. And I knew there was something wrong with my brother because he'd never been like, I don't know, violent like that. If you can call that violence. I don't know. See, I still don't, how violent do you have to be considered violent? I mean, you throw a chair at a kid and it breaks.
Especially when you're talking about what was becoming your normal. I mean, it's hard to look back on that and label it as anything other than that.
Right. So I'm sitting there and I'm just starting to kind of like, this is the first like real memories I have of this bedroom. I didn't even remember it before then. Now this is like my first memories of being in this room. Even though we'd lived there for a couple of years before that. My mom, she was kind of a messy house person. That's saying it lightly. Back then it wasn't that bad, but my room wasn't very clean. I had a lot of my mom's like office things in there. So there was a telephone and there was a phone book and I knew how to read. So I opened up the phone book and cause I was thinking about this. I was like, something's wrong with my brother. I can't contact my parents because, no cell phones. And I didn't know the number of where they were staying. And I knew that my brother wasn't going to let me call my parents where they were. So I just kind of stayed there and I was just like, I didn't want to call the police because I didn't think that it was anything that I had to call the police for. And I knew that my mom was already in the habit of threatening that if we didn't keep the house clean, that CPS would come and take the kids away, like me and my younger brother, because my older brother and older sister were already adults. So that was already like being drilled into us at this point. So I was afraid to call the police. And I also didn't want anything happening to my brother. I didn't want my brother going to jail. I just knew that he needed help. And I knew that this wasn't a good situation for me. And I was going to tell my parents, maybe you should maybe you shouldn't like leave me with them anymore.
Like you weren't looking for trouble. You were looking to stop the trouble.
But I was thinking 7 years old. I didn't even know how to hardly process any of this. I was just trying to take the next step. Like I need help. So I picked up the phone book and maybe I did a stupid thing, but I opened up the phone book and I called one person. It was somebody that I knew. Every person I called were people that I knew. It was like people from church. I was like, oh, that's the next person you call, is like someone at church that you trust, like a Sunday school teacher.
Well, you're doing what any kid would do.
That's what I was told. Yes, I was looking for a trusted grown-up. Exactly. And so, because my parents were unavailable and my caregiver was unavailable, obviously. And so I called my Sunday school teacher and it rings. The machine picks up. And so I left a message. And this is when I had a lot of guilt about this for a very long time, about the way that I said it, because I didn't know how to say it. But I said, hi, teacher so-and-so. It's Lexi. I'm calling because my brother is beating me up and I don't know what to do. And so I said, can you please call me, or I'll see you in church tomorrow, because it was like a Saturday. And so I hang up the phone and I was really nervous and upset. I waited a few minutes. I didn't get a call back. And so I called another number and left the same message, and another number. And I don't know how many I called, maybe like 4 or 5, possibly 6, 7. I really don't remember, but I remember I called quite a few people and left the same message and nobody picked up. And I didn't realize at the time all those Sunday school teachers were at the Sunday school meeting with my parents. And so I eventually put myself to bed. I fall asleep again with no dinner. I wasn't thrown in a bathtub this time. You must have felt
very helpless and overwhelmed through all this.
I was. I don't remember like labeling it that, but looking back, I was very overwhelmed. That's why I went straight to bed. I just slept. I didn't know what else to do. And as a child, that was not normal for me to lay down and go to sleep. I was a very active kid. I did not take naps well. I did not go to sleep well. But this particular
what
night,
kid likes to go to bed?
Yeah,
so that must have been heavy.
it was very heavy. And also, like, I felt safe because I had a bunk bed and I was like on the top bed. And so I knew that, like, once I was in bed, like, that's what everyone wanted. Everyone just wanted me to shut up and go to bed. That's what everyone wanted. So I was going to shut up and I was going to go to bed. And so I went to bed, and the next morning comes, and it's like, it's Sunday, and I'm like kind of in a daze. I'm really tired. I'm being dragged around the house, like getting ready, like, being pulled by my sister or my mom or whatever, my dress on, my hair done, my breakfast wolfed down, which is probably like, dry bowl of cereal or something. Just whatever I could fit in that short amount of time that we were rushing to go to church. And so I really wasn't thinking about what had happened the night before. I was remembering it, but I knew that it wasn't the time to talk about it, I guess, because we were in our Sunday morning rush, and my mom was with the baby, and my dad was trying to get stuff in the car because we played music on Sundays for church, and my sister was doing my hair, and my older brother was helping my dad with stuff. It just wasn't a time to talk.
Sunday mornings in a Christian household. I know how that circus goes.
It's
That's
like bring your kids
too,
to work day almost. It's like that.
Yeah, it's craziness on a Sunday morning.
Especially when you're like PKs, when you're like pastor's kids. Yeah, if you didn't know what PK
Yeah, I feel
is,
that.
Yeah. So we're getting ready for church. And I go, and I'm kind of like more in my Sunday morning mode, I think. I don't remember the car ride there. I'm sure, like, again, we didn't talk. There was always music playing in the car. So we listened to music on the way to church, and we get to church, and I walk in, and, I'm kind of expecting the normal, like the normal church buzz, like the hum of everyone talking and saying hello and good morning, and the piano, piano player getting ready to play, or the pastor is praying before, the normal stuff. But it was different. I walk into church, and I walk into the main, the sanctuary is what we called it. I walk in, and there's only a couple people in there. It almost seems kind of like dark. Like, nobody's there.
Like the mood is dark, you mean?
The mood was dark, and it even felt like even all the lights weren't even on yet.
Okay.
Like everyone was kind of late or something. And because no one.
So it's not your normal lively Sunday exciting kind of.
Yeah, the sanctuary was kind of empty. There was just a few people at the back just walking in. And I was saying hi to everyone when I was coming in, but when I came in, there wasn't really anyone in there. So I just kind of stood at the back because I was waiting for my family to come in, because I didn't know where we were sitting. So I was always, I was waiting for my mom and my dad and my brother and my sister to come in. And so I stood there and I waited. And I remember, I don't know who it is, but I remember someone who was close to me. It was a male figure, and it bugs me because, like, I don't know who the person is, and it bothers me that this person was there and I don't know who they are, because I can't ask them, like, if they remember this. And it's like, this bugs me. But there was a person there, and I don't remember who they are, but I know I knew them. And they were standing there, and then I had other people started coming in, and, I'm trying to say hi, hi, sister so-and-so, or hi, brother so-and-so. Nice to see you. But nobody's really saying anything to me. Everybody's got this look on their face. And all of a sudden, I see my Sunday school teacher and everyone else I called kind of stand in a line. And they walk by me, and everybody points their finger at my face and says, "How dare you make a call like that? Do you know that you could have gotten your brother in some serious trouble?" And I wasn't really allowed to talk. I remember, I think maybe I was probably too scared to talk also, because I was
I guess when you got this whole group of adults, they've already decided what you'd done wrong.
Yes.
I mean, what is there to say
exactly,
at that
yeah.
point?
They had already decided that I had done something wrong. And of course, me being 7, I'm thinking, oh God, that was wrong, I guess. Shoot. That was bad.
So you were already second guessing yourself, and then these people had just confirmed that you'd done the wrong thing.
That I had done the wrong thing, exactly. And that what I had done not only was the wrong thing, but it was a terrible thing. And
so it wasn't even a case of anybody acknowledging that, hey, your brother kind of fucked up.
That's the thing. Nobody even asked me.
This is a case of, like, you put him at risk.
Yeah. Nobody even bothered to ask, hey, are you okay? What happened?
So
Tell
you must
me
have
about
felt
it.
really kind of like small and unimportant, or even like unwanted in some way at this point.
Oh, I felt like I was totally scapegoated because it didn't end there.
Because you're 7 years old at
I'm
this
7
point,
years
right?
old.
So you're still basically a baby, and then these people that are supposed to be looking out for you, they seem like they're looking out for the person who was kind of like treating you like shit.
Well, that was the thing. And some people were like, well, how did all those people just shake their fingers at you? It wasn't like they got the message and just chose not to believe me. What had happened was the reason why no one was in that sanctuary is because my mother had found out from someone that I'd made the calls. Like, I guess people at church
so she
already
was
knew.
kind of running interference for your brother.
Yeah, she like whipped up a lie really quick and said, oh, she was playing with the phone. The phone was left in her room. She was playing with it. And he was babysitting her, and she was acting, she was misbehaving, and he sent her to bed, and she didn't like that, so she made calls. Or whatever. I don't know exactly because I wasn't there, but it was something like, that's what it seemed like to me.
But I mean, as Christians, it doesn't really seem like they were really placing much value on the truth.
No, they weren't interested in asking me personally what happened. They didn't, yeah. So it really bothered me, and it didn't stop there. When I went home, some big changes happened. I do my own laundry now. I cook my own food now. I take care of myself.
This is as a
now.
result of the phone calls you mean?
Yeah, and I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. And I definitely was not allowed to use the phone. So, yeah, my mother was really, really angry with me. She was really, really mad at me.
It sounds like they kind of doubled down on the shittiness, though, because on top of like not sticking up for you and not protecting you, now it sounds like they've sort of thrust you into a role of more like an adult should have had at 7 years old.
And, I think a lot of that stemmed from my mother's anxiety. My mother has mental illness. She's been indirectly diagnosed because she won't go to counseling, but she has narcissistic personality disorder. But I know she has other like disorders too, probably like borderline personality. I don't know. That's what I've been told by like several therapists, not just one. So yeah, I have to like, but I didn't know that about my mom then, I know. But,
well, she was probably just mom at this point,
she's just
right?
mom. And mom's really mad at me. I did the wrong thing. And, what I was doing, it wasn't a big deal. Yeah, I kind of want to know how to cook. So I can make grilled cheese, I think. So let's do that. Let's put grilled cheese and let's burn it 12 times before you get it right. Because it was cast iron pan and I didn't know anything about high, low. Nobody was supervising me either. I'm literally like in my
trial and error.
Yeah, I'm literally like in my underwear, like walking around feeding myself and doing my own laundry because people just stopped. And
right.
To top things off, if the phone answered, I wasn't allowed to use the phone except when my mom would tell me to answer it. And whenever she would tell me to answer it, it would always be the same person. God, I want to say his name, but I don't want to say his name because he's a fucking prick. And his name was, I'm going to say Chris. His name was Chris.
Okay.
He used to call for my brother and, he used to ask for my brother and I would say, hey, so-and-so's, Chris is on the phone. Okay, I'll be there in a minute, And so I'm 7 now. My brother's 18. He's spending a lot of time in his room. And then going to his friend's house and then coming back and spending more time in his room, sleeping, loud music, just like these weird cycles of abnormality. And so I answered this phone and it's this guy, Chris, and he wants to talk to my brother. He's always calling to talk to my brother. And, but while he's waiting for my brother to come to the phone, I'm supposed to stay on the phone and entertain him, I guess. So
you're like the hold music, essentially.
Yeah. So I'm on the phone and, there's no hold button or anything. And you don't want to leave the phone sitting there because the baby could get it or, it could fall or, just hold on to the phone and don't leave the person just hanging there. So I'm sitting there on the phone. I'm like sitting on the counter in the kitchen and it's like messy and there's dishes everywhere and it's smelly and it's gross. And I'm sitting there and I'm talking to this guy and he's asking me questions like, hey, how are you? Good. What are you doing today? Nothing. So how old are you now? I'm 7. Well, when you get 18, why don't you give me a call? And, it was like things like that. But the more the conversations went on, it was like, so when are you going to be 18? Like, it was more personal. Like, hey, what are you doing today? So did you play with your friend, or did you do this? And he started asking me more personal questions, and I didn't like it.
Did you sort of get what he was driving at that age?
I didn't get what he was driving at, but he definitely creeped me out. He definitely made me uncomfortable. And I definitely knew that he should not be talking to me that way. I knew that I was a child, and I knew that nobody had business talking to me that way. And I used to tell my mom, I don't like talking to him. He says stupid things to me. He asks me when I can go on a date with him. And she would say things like, oh, he's just teasing, and she'd, blow it off. But he did that.
Did anybody ever assume that you were in harm's way?
No. They did everything they could to tell me that I was fine.
Because it's sounding like everything you're telling me. It sounds like a recurring theme of you being put in bad positions and the people that are supposed to care for you just sort of brushing it off as you being, I don't know, like a liar or a troublemaker or a nuisance.
I have a lifetime of situations like that where I was like purposefully placed in situations that made me vulnerable. And looking back, I'm like, why would they ever even think of doing that? Like, I went to modeling school in the 90s for acting classes, but the modeling school had acting classes. So I was going, but I had to take a bus, to Los Angeles by myself on Saturdays to go to this class. And I was walking around downtown LA by myself with adults. I was in an adult class because I was too advanced for the kids class or whatever they said because of my acting. Because I already had
so when you say with adults, you don't mean you were with adult chaperones. No, you mean you were just in the company of other adults.
Yes, I was in the company of other adults, male and female. And
LA seems like kind of a busy city for a young girl to be trying to navigate on her own.
I didn't know where the hell I was going. Like, when we left the building from class to go to lunch, I had to go find like McDonald's or a restaurant or a store nearby where I could buy my meals. It took me a while to get to know, those streets or whatever. But, I was walking around downtown Los Angeles at 11 years old by myself, with other adults. And sometimes these adults would take me out to lunch with them and they would buy my meals and stuff. And they were always really great. Nothing bad or inappropriate ever happened. But think about how easy that could have been, though. I'm like, I was on the bus for hours.
I get that you were in danger. I mean, I think anybody listening to this is already like their skin's probably crawling a little bit because we're all thinking about either our own kids or like kids that we know and like trying to imagine them in these environments. And it seems so impossible.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I'm more curious about is like you in the middle of this situation. Because I mean, like the creepy factor and the irresponsible factor, these are obvious things.
Yeah, they are.
But what's going on in your head at this time? So here you are in the company of these adults. You're used to the grown-ups in your lives being kind of shitty people. Yeah. And now suddenly you're in the company of grown-ups that are kind of looking out for you. They're making sure that you're fed, you're entertained and whatever.
Yeah.
Like what's going through your mind when you're experiencing all this? Well,
when I was with them, like I did have anxiety. I'm like, are they going to be nice to me? And so I would sit with them and they would buy my meals and they would tell me I didn't have to pay sometimes, sometimes like, oh, let her pay for her own meal, like if she has money, like let her do it, but sometimes it was like pizza or something. And, that was kind of expensive for a little kid. So, they'd buy me a whole pizza by myself and it was nice. They were nice to me. Like they made sure that, they weren't trying to babysit me, but they were there kind of keeping an eye on me, making sure, we would hang out or whatever. I was another student. So they're just like, hey, come on, have lunch with us. So it was more like that. But, it was still like, I was still vulnerable and I was scared. And, So
the anxiety you're feeling, is that just about like the things that like a normal, I hate to say normal, but what just like your common person would expect to cause the anxiety, like, oh, this is an inappropriate situation or I'm not taken care of? Or is this like tied more into like your experience with your older brother?
I think I was just at this point, when I started going to modeling class or whatever, I was 11. So I was already used to being on my own at that point. So, so it was like kind of like this whole chain of events thing where my parents they spent less and less time with me, but they spent more money getting me out of the house. So it was like, oh, take her to drama class or take her to this or take her there. They didn't like having me around because when I was around, I was usually talking about what I didn't like at home.
So this wasn't the case of them trying to give you the best experiences. This is just a way to make you kind of like fuck off and get out of the way.
Well, the modeling school was my idea. The ice skating classes were my idea. All of that was my idea. When it looked like my parents were being supportive, what they were really doing was just trying to get rid of me. They didn't like spending time with me. We didn't have like dinner time at the table. We didn't have family time like that. Like I only sat with my family to eat if we would go out or if we were at some other family's house.
Was that kind of like an image thing, do you think?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It became more evident as I was an adult because it was like my mom changed what she was, she did the same stuff. She just, was different circumstances that she would use to, gain public sympathy or attention from what I was doing. So it was like they were taking me here because they didn't want to spend time with me. And then I was doing all these things and accomplishing all these things and they were getting attention for it. And so then we'd go to church or we would go to my runway shows or my acting things, and my mom would talk me up. My parents would, oh, she's such a great kid and all of that. But people don't know that like when we got in the car, the yelling would start. And the belittling. Yeah. And so now, it's not just my sister. It's not just like my brother. It's my parents too. And so I don't feel like this is my normal family. So I'm starting to, not think about externally asking for anyone's help anymore. Cause I feel like that this is my life.
Interested in being a guest on the show? Send us an email, wtbbpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to When the Bow Breaks.
Before we go too far,
yeah,
because I know it's really easy to like get lost in, moving forward in your story, but there's a couple things that have sort of jumped out at me while you were talking. And I think like the first thing I kind of like to go back to, I think sort of ties into what you're talking about right now. And I wouldn't mind exploring your church life just a little bit because, from what you've been saying about your mom, especially, I haven't heard much about your dad yet. And I do want to get into that, but your mom seems like she's a very image-oriented person. She also seems like she's kind of disconnected on a like moral and ethical level from what I would expect to see in somebody who values, kind of Christian fundamental beliefs.
Yeah.
Like what are you seeing like as a child observing your parents in the church? And also, I know I'm going to like just overload you with question here, but you talk a lot, so I want to give you a chance to just run so I can shut up. The other part of it is, like you're talking about how you're observing your family life as being kind of just like normal family life, but you must have had some chance to observe other families while interacting in church functions and whatnot.
Well, that's the funny thing, AC, because whenever I did spend time with other families, it was usually families that my parents approved of. And it was usually families that were worse off than we were, so that we would always look better and they would always look worse to me.
Okay, so even in social situations, like everything was stacked to make your mother's image sort of maintain itself.
Well, there were families that I did spend time with that my mother had nothing to do with. So I did have a chance to get to know nice families. So, and I did see, structured families where they had, loving relationships and a tidy house. And
does that seem kind of weird to you?
Not weird. I appreciated it and I liked it and I hated going home.
So you could actually see though and recognize that was kind of the way that things were more supposed to be.
Yes. But at the same time, I also had my mother feeding me stories when I would go home about the people that I was with. So I was also getting like conflicting information from my mother, but then I was going there and having good
everything's
experiences.
not as it seems kind of approach.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, my mom was always trying to say, oh, there's something wrong with them. And she would always try to claim that she could pinpoint what was wrong.
Okay.
Things like that. When in reality, there really wasn't anything wrong. It was just her being delusional and trying to muddle my opinion of the family that I was spending time with.
Okay.
Yeah. So
like, what about like it sounds like there's a lot of hypocrisy going on.
Yeah. Because when it comes to the religious thing, we were taught one thing, but then we were seeing another thing represented or displayed, or, we were not seeing the examples that you would think would come from a Christian home.
Right.
We were told to love and forgive, but no one ever modeled that to us. It took me years before I even learned how to apologize to people properly, because no one had ever apologized to me for anything. And I was only ever made to apologize, like forced to apologize.
The kids learn best through examples, so that must have been kind of tough.
It was tough. And then it was like, okay, I'm not being told what to do, or I'm not being shown what to do, but I'm being told what to do. So I was always trying to just do what I was told so that I wouldn't get in trouble. Because if I got in trouble, then it was like, you get a Christian spanking, that happened very frequently with me, because if y'all can't tell, I talk, and my family didn't like that. So it was whenever they were doing something wrong, or something that was bothering me that I was trying to express or trying to share my feelings, I was always being told to feel, or be made to feel like I was in the wrong, or I shouldn't feel that way, or, so it was really difficult. It was really confusing to grow up in a family like that. And it was hard. I was trying to break away from that, but I didn't know how. And at the same time, I was really scared, because my mom had always built up this fear in me of other people. And so I grew to be, especially during high school, I was very, very quiet and introverted. I stopped kind of standing up for myself, because it wasn't effective for a decade. And so I just became very closed off and not really open. And I started to play music because I thought maybe I could communicate something, but I thought that was a way I could be very vague about it.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of my songs were kind of meant to be Christian songs, but they weren't really about that at all.
That's always been the nice thing with Christian music, though, is you can hide so much behind
you can
a presumably Jesus-y lyric, right?
Yeah, you can. And I mean, I used to be a worship leader. I'll say that right now. I used to be a worship leader. And I know all about it, the ins and the outs of what it's like. That's one of the hardest positions in church. I'm going to say that it's tough because it's a creative job. It's very personal. Anyway, I just wanted to say, tip my hats to all you worship leaders. I know how tough it is if you're listening. But anyway, I don't do that anymore. But so my home environment wasn't good. I saw glimmers of, niceness from other families, but and I spent time with those people, and I was even invited on vacations with them, and because I was always so well behaved, and because I never talked back, and because I never caused any problems, because I was always afraid of getting in trouble. I'm thinking, God, if my family
you knew how
hits,
to keep your head down and just shut up.
Keep my head down and shut up. Wherever I was at, I learned the rules real quick. I freaking learned the rules of the house there, because I did not want to get in trouble at anybody else's house. And with whatever my mom was saying, they're this or they're that, I was like, oh God, what are they going to do to me if I get in trouble, And there was this one guy, he's like, you got to call me sir. And I was like, ooh, okay. So then I was like, okay. And I got to stay here for a week now because my parents are out of town. So, I knew I wanted better, and I knew that I didn't want to be like that when I grew up. And when I was 17, I was basically counting down the minutes to when I could leave, because I knew I wasn't loved at home, And I knew I wasn't being heard at home, especially. And I knew that all of my words and the things that I've expressed were twisted around by my mom and my sister. And my brother had a drug problem now, drinking problems, things would go disappearing. I was 13. I started working for myself because, my mom wasn't buying my things. She was paying for my brother's things when he was on drugs, but she wouldn't buy my things. So I had to go and get a job and do homeschool because I was homeschooled. So I was homeschooling and working, babysitting. And then I would have to come home. And after all of that babysitting, I would have to give some of my money or all of it to my brother, so that he could go get gas. He'd go around the corner and then come home.
Things
and
for you,
they
started off kind of shitty, and it sounds like this kept getting progressively worse.
It kept getting worse. Yes, it did. At this point, my sister was married and out of the house, but it was worse. My brother's drug problem was worse. He was rarely working. He was having a lot of problems. He was having a lot of breakdowns. I remember there were nights when he was just crying and screaming, and my mom was trying to talk to him, but she was basically feeding him bullshit. And I would be like, well, why can't he go to counseling? And my mother would say things like, counselors are crazier than the people they try to help. And that was exactly what she said to me when I was 15, after I tried to commit suicide and my mom found out about it. I don't want to go too much into that. I don't like going into the details about that because I don't want to give
enough
people
that
ideas.
You were there. I get it.
Yeah. So, it was like 3 times, and she told me, when I begged her to go to counseling because she wanted to know why, I begged her to go to counseling. I said, I'm having emotional problems and I'm overwhelmed and I need some support. Can you please take me to counseling? I'm like bawling. I'm not even like just talking to her. I'm bawling my eyes out. I'm like begging. I'm on my knees. I'm saying, can you please take me to counseling? And no, that wasn't going to happen.
It kind of feels like your mom had a problem with counselors because she didn't want to look her own mental illness in the eye.
Yeah, that was exactly what was wrong. Because as I got older, it was like, the counseling thing was always shut down. So I'm 17. I'm getting ready to I decided to live at that point because it seemed like my mom just wanted me dead at that point. She didn't give a shit what happened to me, really.
Right.
All those instances, it would take forever, but there's so many instances where my parents just kind of left me somewhere, or in danger somewhere. And I was so sick of that. And so I wanted to leave. And so I turned 17, and what do? Stupid. I move in with my sister because I'm thinking my sister's an adult now. She's married. She has a kid. She's not going to treat me the way she used to when she was a teenager.
Yeah, that's childhood stuff.
Yeah,
right?
That's kid stuff. We were just kids. I'm going to be 18 soon and I can do my own thing, but I can stay with my sister because my sister actually asked me. She said, because she had an acting or a assistant directing job for me to do that had to do with a children's play. So I went up there to help assist and do that. I also played the main adult role also in the production. So it was a lot of work. And I was thinking, I'll just stay there. And then I was going to go back home because I was thinking I was just going to have a break from my family. But I really wanted to stay. And so I stayed, but it wasn't a good situation. My sister, she wasn't slapping me or anything, but she was definitely financially abusing me. And she was definitely keeping me from leaving the house. She was definitely taking money from my mom and not giving it to me, that money that was supposed to be for me. So again, I was without deodorant and things like that. And then I was like, okay, now I got to get a job again because, no one's taking care of me. But even then I wasn't allowed to do that. So, went to another relative. She told me how to use the bus schedule and helped me get a bank account and all these things and got me set up as an adult, basically. I moved in with a family in my church. I rented a room from them and I stayed there for a year and a half and I worked retail for a year and a half plus church work for free. So I worked my ass off all the time. I didn't want to go home. I was just glad to kind of be out on my own and doing my own thing and not having too much criticism. And, but I had a lot of anxiety still. I fast forward, there's, having to do with my estrangement. Fast forward, I'm married with 4 kids but I'm still kind of stuck in the, my family, they love me somehow. I love them. It's going to get better. We just need to talk, or I need to, they're not really hearing me. I'm not explaining it in a way they can understand. You know, I'm always trying, at this point, I'm always trying to like improve my relationship with my family. It never seems to get better. It always seems to get worse. And,
so you're explaining in a way that who can understand?
Yeah. My parents. I was trying, because they weren't like
you're
hearing
talking about
me.
being married and having kids and talking about family. I'm just want to be clear which family we're talking about.
Okay. I was married, had kids, and I was trying to explain my feelings about how, you know, about all that stuff that happened to me as a kid. I was trying to talk about that to my parents, but they were never receptive about it. And it never happened. Or they still didn't believe that my sister slapped me. Yeah. You know, so they couldn't even go there. And it's like, even when I tried talking, it's like, they couldn't even hear me. Like, it wasn't, they didn't get it. Like
they wouldn't even just throw you the bone of validating your experience.
Yeah, not even. They would not even do that. And so again, like more depression just kind of sank in, and I got deeper and deeper into depression. It was so terrible. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I kept thinking there was something wrong with me. Why do they hate me? And it's because of that one time. And it's like, but then no, as I was an adult, I went to counseling finally, because I didn't ask my mommy this time. I went on my own. And when I went on my own, I started opening up about all this shit. And then when I started talking about it, I realized that my parents were freaking neglectful and abusive. And so was my sister, and my brother had problems and they didn't do anything. And so all of this stuff just came out. And then it was like, well, now what am I going to do? And then my counselor and this other counselor and this other counselor were like, oh, narcissistic personality disorder sounds like what your mother has and what your sister has, and possibly some other things, and possibly some schizophrenia from your brother, and bipolar from your father, and that's what it sounds like. And I'm like, well, what the heck? Does this mean that I can't even solve any of these issues now because there's no hope? And then he said, well, they need to go to counseling. And I said, that's the problem. I said they would never go, and they spoke against it, and they hated all my friends who were studying psychology, and they couldn't stand it. And I was like, if I could get my mother into this room, she'd probably just divert everything. It would be word salads, what we call it. Like she'd twist everything around. It would be like ineffective. And then he's like, okay, so what do you want to accomplish here in counseling? And I said, well, I need to do what's right for myself. And just after a while, the conclusion came to, I can't be around them anymore. They won't stop. They don't respect my boundaries. They don't listen when I say, hey, I don't like talking about blowing people up and conspiracy theories at the table when my children are there. Hey, I don't like my sister coming around my kids because she's starting to do the same thing with my kids as she was to me. I don't want her around. They didn't respect those things. And so I'm a heated parent at this point. This starts to become all about my kids. I'm not even thinking about my own feelings. I was just mad because they weren't listening. Again, they weren't listening. And so I heavily debated cutting it off with them for a year, because I wanted to give them opportunities to hear me. I wanted to give them opportunities to talk to me and to honor my requests regarding my kids and regarding my own personal boundaries. And they just weren't doing that at all. And in fact, they were going and they were stealing things from my home and, things like that. And it was getting worse and worse and worse. And I just had to stop. I really was going crazy, and I had to stop. And the day came when I was recovering from a surgery, and my parents were babysitting, and I was really uncomfortable with them babysitting, but it was like for a few days I was in a lot of pain. And so they were watching them, and I was always calling to check up on them and stuff. But there was this one day where my mom called me. And so I picked up the phone, and I expected to hear one of my kids or something, or expected to hear her ask me a question about the kids. But when I picked it up, she didn't answer. I just hear this muffling noise, and then I hear my sister's voice. Now, my sister, she was like my main abuser growing up, really.
Right.
She abused me verbally, emotionally, financially. She did a lot of what they call psychological molestation with me and my younger brother and my niece, things like that. So at this point, I was already estranged from my sister. I was already not talking to her, and I already told my parents, don't let her around my kids. But I heard my sister's voice on the phone, and so I flipped out. I had to wait a while because I had some pain medication, from my surgery. And so I remember drinking lots of water. I remember calling my spouse, and I remember calling my friend, and I remember calling my counselor, and I was like, what do I do? Like, this was like the last straw. Like, I gave them chance after chance, and they're not doing it, and I can't do this anymore. And it was already like a decision that I had already made. I was just waiting for them to screw it up, I guess. So I texted my mom, and I said, I'm coming to get the kids, make sure they're ready. And that's all I said. So I got myself together. I drove down there to pick up my kids. I was upset. I was doing everything I could to stay calm. And when I got there, I just remember my parents smiling and laughing. My sister wasn't there, of course. She'd already left because I texted that I was coming because I really didn't want my sister there. I was worried that there was going to be some sort of confrontation if she was there. So I wanted her out of there because I wanted her away from my kids.
So their sort of like jovial attitude, was that, why was that surprising to you? Like, was it abnormal for you to have called and said, look, like, make sure the kids are ready?
Yeah, because I had already set it up to where they were going to stay for like a couple more days.
Okay, so this was like you were cutting the visit short. Yeah,
they were there because my surgery was like in the summer, and the surgery ended up being more invasive than it was supposed to be. And so I was in a lot more pain than expected. And so my recovery time was lengthened. And so I needed like a good week because I was on heavy painkillers for like a week straight because I was in so much pain and I couldn't take care of my kids. So, the next best thing, go to grandma and grandpa's, so they're there, and, so I go and pick them up. And when I get there, my sister's not there. My parents are laughing, smiling, talking, being really, really chatty with me. Cause it was out of character for me to say, I'm coming and getting the kids, make sure they're ready.
And what about them? Were they sort of acting out of character
as well?
They
were acting out of character. I mean, my mom was always,
so they knew chatty, they fucked up.
I'm pretty sure they did. They were like, they were trying to cover it up. They didn't think I knew. So I get my kids in the car. I get their stuff in the car. My mom said something about, see you in a couple days for this church thing that she invited me to that I already told her I wasn't going to because we already had plans. And, I just remember, I remember walking out the door, and I remember my dad trying to hug me, which is odd because my dad never hugged me growing up. And every hug after that felt very awkward. He tried to hug me, and this time I actually pushed him away. Like, not shoved him or anything, but like, I was like, no.
Yeah, it's just like this hug is over now.
Yeah, I'm not doing this. I'm not hugging you right now. I'm not in a huggy mood. Like, I wanted to just say that, but instead I just kind of like pushed and I backed away, and he acted like it was like no big deal. And I get in the car, and I just wait, I like, bye, fine, bye. And I shut the door. And so I turn around, I turn the corner, and my kids are in the car, and I asked them, I said, was Aunt B there? And they said, yeah. She comes over all the time, Mom, and and I know she's not supposed to be there. She hides in the office when you come drop us off, and then she comes out when you're done. She parks her car around the corner. I said, why didn't you tell me before? She's like, well, I just knew today. I knew for sure she wasn't supposed to be there because I heard Grandma saying that you texted and that she had to leave before you got there. So my oldest already knew that my kids were very uncomfortable with her at this point because she'd already abused them in a couple different ways. My sister had already slapped my son at this point. My sister had already neglected my kids because my mom was taking my kids over to her house unknowingly. I had no idea she was doing this. She was taking my children over for my sister to watch, and my sister was neglecting them. And I didn't know that this was happening because it took a long time for my kids to be able to say this. And they were using my two younger children who weren't really of talking age yet or of that processing age. There were like times when I picked up my son, and none of the diapers were used in the diaper bag. It was just, he was left in his diaper all day.
Which is more neglect, more shittiness, just like what you'd gone through.
And it was like, okay, so I was keeping them, away from my parents, more. It was like I only used them in emergency situations, like with the stinking surgery. I couldn't afford a babysitter for a week, and I was really hoping that everything was going to be okay. And I was already we were planning on moving, and I was like, okay, when we move, I won't talk to them anymore. I won't see them anymore. It'll be okay. But it wasn't going to be like that. I knew that I had to cut it off completely, especially for my kids' sake. So I did that, and that was the last day I talked to them. Personally, I sent them a letter via mail and email explaining my estrangement and the reasons why, because I wanted it in writing. If they were going to they couldn't interrupt my letter. They were either going to read it or they won't, or they wouldn't. So I gave them a letter, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. If there is ever a chance for you to reconnect with me, it will have to be after you've had significant time in counseling, because I won't talk to you otherwise. And I said, don't call me, don't text me or anything like that. I did give them permission to contact my husband, because for emergencies, they were older and they didn't have, my other siblings didn't do shit for them. So that line of communication was open at first. You wanted to make sure that your
parents were still taken care of.
Yes, I wanted to make sure my parents were still taken care of, because at this point, I didn't think it was going to be like a forever thing. I just thought it was going to be temporary, that, this will jog their memory maybe. Or maybe this will get their attention. Maybe when I finally stop talking like they asked. Maybe when I finally shut up. Maybe when I'm finally gone and I'm not in the picture. Maybe my sister won't hate me so much, and maybe my mother won't be like that to me. So I estranged myself. Yeah.
I'm going to put you on pause.
Okay.
You're getting emotional and you're speeding up. So I think we'll take a break for tonight, and we can get back to this next time. Okay.
Okay.